But then I saw the creation overnight. It has to be said overnight. You went from nonprofit organizations to for-profit, multi-million-dollar corporations, where you didn't. Your agenda was not a social agenda, but your agenda overnight went from a social agenda like jobs and health and welfare and education to making money. Your job under the law was to make money, because that's the only reason a corporation comes into existence. As Congress had said, these were to be for-profit corporations. Of course, there was a choice. You could have become a nonprofit organization, but all the Native corporations chose to become for-profit corporations. It was a tremendous overnight happening. And you'd go into these boardrooms, and you'd want to talk about creating jobs, and you'd want to talk about education. You want to talk about oil, heating oil, and subsistence rights. But then you'd have to look at the agenda, and you said, well, we're required to have an audit. We're getting this money, and we have to make money. What do we do? And so what do? You look around Alaska, and there just wasn't $1 billion in 1971, wasn't enough money to do economic development, because every project in Alaska was $100 million or $250 million or $1 billion. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline was a multi-billion-dollar job. So it was a heck of a lot to expect from people who were social activists, political activists, but they did a fantastic job. And I look back on it, but many of them were treated with so disrespect. And I think a lot of it was promoted by coverage in the news media. The news media basically said, okay, you're a for-profit making corporation. Your job is to declare a dividend, or to make money so that you can declare a dividend. What have you done for your shareholders lately? By the way, what have you done for the natives? So the expectations were raised, I think, by the non-native community. And they were the only ones who controlled the media, and these messages went out throughout Alaska that you had these for-profit corporations. And it took a tremendous amount of effort, and you look at the 1970s, and you saw one former Native Association president after another who had become the president of a for-profit corporation, our regional corporations. They fell one by one, and there was so much dissension in the Native community. And it was big news. It was big news. If Chalista elected a new president, it was big news. If Doyon elected a new president, it was big news. The fight in Alaska was big news, because everybody was interested in these Native corporations, and the expectations were so high. People, they're promoting, you're a corporation shareholder. Where's your dividend? Where's your dividend? Where's your dividend? So people began to think, dividend, I want my dividend, I want my dividend. And the Native corporations matured in the 1970s, but that maturity came only after a lot of bloodletting, a lot of very, very difficult emotional times, very difficult situations for leaders in these Native corporations. And you have to respect the kind of courage that they had to stay put and to move forward. And I'll meet some of the old leaders now, and they're I shouldn't call them old, but they're elders, but they're in their 70s, they're in their 80s now, and you have to say thank you. And that's one thing I think the Native community has never done. It's never said thank you to the leaders of the 1960s and the leaders of the 1970s, because our whole attitude is, we got to beat them. We got to beat them because we have a proxy campaign. We got to beat them. So you did whatever it took to beat them, to get them out of the way, so the next generation to come in. And then what I saw in the 1970s was this superimposition of corporate America on indigenous people. And a lot of it, I would have to blame the lawyers, because the lawyers didn't understand natives. The business managers of these Native corporations didn't understand natives, they understood corporations. And so rather than taking the time to understand natives, the lawyers and the business managers superimposed the corporate model on the Native corporations. And that's why we had why today we have such proxy campaigns where management controls the whole election process. It's in another time, perhaps I would call it the creation of corporate fascism. I admit perhaps that's what corporations are, fascism. But if you look at corporations and governments look at corporations as governments for Native people, governments, then there's been kind of the corporate model has usurped the Native community, and it's become the Native corporation model has become the way Alaska Natives now do business and conduct public policy issues. And I think that's not good. It's not. I don't think it's healthy for the communities in rural Alaska, because most of those Alaska Natives out in rural Alaska are not shareholders in Native corporations. You know, because it's been a long time since 1971. It's been almost 40 years. You know, there's been a lot of people born in 40 years, and a lot of people have died, you know. And, you know, 40 years, you know, the population of the Alaska Native community in 1971 was about 60,000, maybe 5,000 outside the state of Alaska. 60,000 Alaskan Natives. Now with the 2000 census, you're looking at maybe 140,000, 150,000. You know, that's a big growth. So if the question becomes, what's the future like? Where does the future go for the Alaska Native? Holy cow, boy, do we have challenges. We have challenges, and it's going to boil down, I think, to be determined by greed. It's going to be those who are shareholders and those who are not shareholders, the haves and the have-nots. And you could create life estates for those Alaska Natives born after 1970. Yes, you can do that. But there's one thing they will never share in. They will never share all of the afterborn with those who have life estates. They will never share in the wealth of the land, mineral rights. The mineral rights, how do you describe 44 million acres of land? I've tried to figure out, how do you describe 44 million acres of land? And you know, one day I was sitting in my office and I looked up and I saw all these states of the Union, the 50 or the 48 states of the Union, continental United States. And then I went off to class and I said, someone tell me what 44 million acres of land? And one of my students says, well, we have to, what do you want it? Do you want it in miles? Miles. Yeah, tell me. What is 44 million acres in terms of miles? He had a calculator, he's an engineering student. He said, it's about 57,000 square miles. 57,000 square miles. Wow. And then I went back to my office and I started going through and looking at, you know, what state is 60,000 square miles? Well, Washington is almost 60,000 square miles. Oregon is a bit larger, but it's about, would be a good way to describe what the natives were awarded in the Settlement Act. Oregon would be good. And then right smack dab in the middle of the United States is a state with about 58,000 square miles. That's Missouri, the state of Missouri. That's how much land the native corporations have mineral rights to. And if you're a shareholder who owns shares of stock, original shares of stock, 1971 stock, you will share in the mineral rights of an area the size of the state of Missouri. That's a lot of mineral rights. And what's fascinating about that is that we don't see it. We Alaska Native shareholders don't see it. And, you know, I start out my classes and I say to my students, you know, hey, I'm an Alaska Native. I was alive in 1971. I have 100 shares of stock, 13 shares I inherited from my father upon his death. Anybody want my shares of stock? You know, the non-natives, well, they won't raise their hand because they would say, non-natives can't inherit the stock. So it only goes to natives. And I'll say, no, that's not true. I can leave my shares of stock to anybody I want. And well, then Professor Blatchford, who are you going to leave your shares of stock to? And I say, well, I was going through the checkout counter at one of the grocery stores, and I saw this big story on Prince Harry. And I like Prince Harry. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to leave my 113 shares to Prince Harry and Prince William and maybe Queen Elizabeth, you know, because I think they're going to deserve my shares of stock. And the reaction is, you can't do that. You can't do that. I think you can. Yeah, I think you can leave your shares of stock. And what I see happening is that there will be more and more native, non-native Alaskans, non-native Alaskans, and more Alaska Native non-residents inherit shares of stock. So the control of an area, mineral rights, the control of the mineral estate, and the benefit of the mineral estate will go to those shareholders, whether you're native or non-native. And it could be a Prince Harry, it could be a Bill Gates, it could be one of those. But what about all the other Alaska Natives who still live in the villages, who still practice subsistence, who still believe in respecting the elders? What about them? What about them? I mean, and look at a village. Say you have a village that was 50 people in 1971. Now the village has a population of 300 people in the year 2010. 300 people. You have 50 original shareholders. Many of them have died, and the shares of stock have moved away. So maybe you'll have 100,000 acres of land. Who controls the land? It's not the local natives. It's not a majority of the local residents. It's the shareholders who control the corporation. And a lot of them have moved away. They're living in Juneau, Anchorage, Fairbanks. They're living maybe in Seattle, maybe in Portland. Maybe they're working for Prince Harry or Prince William in England. We don't know, but they're all over the world now. And the wealth of the native corporations is huge, but we don't see it. And I don't think we're going to see it. The best way I can describe it, I suppose, is to look at this big mining development, because everybody in Alaska knows about the big mining development of Pebble. And, you know, Pebble is on a 15 square mile area, and it's in a 500 square mile mining district, about 500 square miles. And Pebble, you know, the original estimates is that there was maybe $1 billion worth of gold, and then it went up to maybe $10 billion of gold, and then later $100 billion worth of gold, and then later $200 billion of gold. That's on a very small area, you know, 15 square miles, and they have all this wealth. It's subsurface estate. It's the mineral rights. It's the mineral rights. If Pebble was on native land, think of the amount of revenue that would flow from the development of this mine to Alaska natives. No, that's incorrect. To shareholders of native corporations created by Congress in 1971. Think of the amount of the dividend, not the dividend, the distribution under 7I and 7J of the Settlement Act. Think what it will be. And, you know, the Earth's population is growing. The major corporations of the world are looking to the Arctic, to Canada, to Alaska, to Siberia. There are very few people. The last undeveloped regions of the world, they're looking north. And this is where a lot of the wealth is. That's why you have so much attention paid to the development of natural resources in Alaska by major corporations and by multi-million membered environmental organizations. They know what's at stake. Do Alaska Natives know what's at stake? I don't know. Do Alaska Native corporations understand, or do they know? Perhaps they do.